Sometimes life comes with twists and turns, and we may not always recognize the person staring back at us in the mirror. And the process of finding ourselves really starts all over again. And today we're going to have a conversation with an awesome group of women talking about that process of finding themselves again. I'm going to play a quick intro and give a few more folks a chance to join us, and then we'll launch into the conversation from there.
I always like to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. You don't always know what you don't know. You may not have it all figured out today, and that's okay. Taking one step at a time, those glimmers become a consistent light. It all finally begins to click. Each and every moment that you experience is shaping the person you are in this life to be.
Sometimes our pain points go all the way back to childhood. What if I allowed myself to imagine a life that was more spacious and expansive than the one I'm living?
What if I don't have to live the same way that everyone else is living?
When you are authentic, your energy changes and the people around you change. It's just like doors just start opening. You're like, well, wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this happen? You're showing up completely different.
And often it does require healing and going in some uncomfortable spaces before we can truly flourish.
Hi, this is Let's Chat, and thank you so much for joining me. Usually we're meeting on Fridays, but today this is one of our rare Sunday get-togethers, but it's for a conversation that hopefully benefits a lot of folks. I know life sometimes can look a little bit different when you're looking back, even a year from now or a few weeks from now, and you're like, wait, I don't recognize where I am right now, and maybe I don't recognize that person staring back in the mirror. Well, today we're going to talk to a few women who are going to share some thoughts on finding myself again. We may be living a life that's less than the one we're capable of living, and we may not be living our passion. So sometimes you have to have that moment where you kind of take inventory of where you are and try to make some decisions about, is where I am actually where I want to be? And do I recognize that person looking back at me? So joining us for this conversation today, we have Meredith Kathleen Newman. She is the founder of Scaling Within, a mindset consultant to CEOs, a licensed therapist, MS and LMFT. Thank you so much for joining me today. And also joining us, returning as well, we have CAREY. She is a plumbing apprentice and teacher. Welcome back, Carly, and Meredith too. So glad to have you both with me again. And then we have LINA ADJOBLE joining us today, mental health advocate, mom of 3, and an entrepreneur. Thanks so much for being here as well, LINA. So glad to have you. And then we have Coach Jessica Horton joining us today. She's a certified life coach practitioner, life strategist, speaker, and a mother. And last but not least, we have Shannon Foreman with us today. She is a CEO, founder of Wealthcare, advisor at Forethought Planning. Thanks so much for being here today too, Shannon. So glad to have all of you today. And this is a conversation that I wanted to have because, sometimes life changes happen and we're trying to figure out, wait a minute, where I am now is a part of where I started or what my plan was. How do I operate from this new space and find myself in this new space? And Lina, I actually want to start with you because you shared with me just kind of your transition and kind of that new place of rediscovering who you are and what your passions are. Can you kind of tell us your story a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So I had a career in IT. I was a business consultant um, for an IT company locally. And then one thing led to another, and I lost my job about 2 years ago. So I was home with my kids, but I have a big entrepreneurial spirit. So I was home with them, but I was still, doing a few things on the side, but still in the tech world. And then I started working with a coach about a year and a half ago, and I actually hired her to help me uncover what was my next move, my next career move, my next power move. And then she actually sensed that I was supposed to be actually taking a break from all the doing, and she encouraged me to really, pause and go inward and figure out, you know, what I was actually supposed to be doing next. Honestly, I was uh, upset. I was upset because I'm the typical type A girl, go, 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 no downtime, just let's keep going. So there was a time of grief, really. I had to grieve that, that period of just doing all the things. I removed myself from professional groups on Facebook. I, created my inbox. I unfollowed, you know, people who I thought were triggers to me, where I felt like, okay, I had to be going all the time. Um, and then while I took that break, I then realized that I actually now had room to feel like I needed a hobby. So, then I was like, oh, okay, I feel like now I have all that brain space. How about I go find a hobby? And then I stumbled upon jewelry making, and then I've just loved it, and it's now a full blown business that I'm just in love with. So yeah.
Oh, Shayla, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Now you can hear me. So the path that you're on right now, it's not a path, if you looked back maybe 5-10 years ago, it's not a path that you envisioned being on, but it's the path that you are on now. How do you feel on this journey where you are?
I feel so peaceful. I don't even know how to describe how to describe it. It's so, I just feel, I want to say, maybe it sounds very cliche, but I feel like the best version of myself right now. I feel like I'm using all the gifts that I have and all the elements of all the past ventures that I've had. I feel like they've all combined into this new thing that I'm doing. So I feel very at peace, and I love it.
That's that's awesome. And sometimes these challenges that get thrown our way and the moment they feel so daunting, but sometimes when you let go and embrace where you are, there may be something beautiful on the other side of that. But that does take courage and it can feel scary, right, Meredith?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about that? I know you work with professionals that are mindset. You're a mindset consultant to CEOs, and sometimes that process of living your most authentic life and showing up in a way that feels most real to you, you have to start by looking within.
Yeah, you really do. And actually, what was just coming to mind is this, it will sound kind of interesting at first, but there's this psychological concept called ambiguous loss. And I think it's a really important one to know, especially when you're making changes or just transitions through life. So most of us understand that if we have a death of a loved one in our life, we go through a grieving process. That's a known connection. Ambiguous loss is when it's not as obvious or concrete as the death of someone, but it still is a grieving process, and it necessitates that we go through that. We often just don't recognize that. And so, for example, it could be the loss of a relationship, a friendship as it was. It could be the loss of dreams or expectations. COVID brought a lot of loss in terms of routine, life as we know it, etc. But the reason that this is key is because when you reach a period where things aren't just cutting it, or something is changing, or something that you hoped would be didn't work out, it's really actually key to have the awareness that I might be going through a loss, and I might just need to go through a grieving process. And there's a lot of different models on grief, but the simplest one is the 5 stages of grief, which is going through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I'm going through this quickly, but the reason that I want to bring this up is part of this process of finding yourself again often necessitates grieving that something didn't work out the way that you wanted, or something is shifting and changing. And as we actually allow ourselves to feel what we need to feel, we ultimately come to a stage of acceptance. And when you get to that new stage of accepting the reality, what is, that's what actually brings you to a whole new place to begin to see the possibilities before you. And that, I think, is a really exciting place to be in, when you let yourself go through that process.
And it's, how important is it to acknowledge what you feel? I mean, acknowledge that you feel that sadness, acknowledge that you feel the grief, and don't just try to cover it up or keep going or keep moving forward. Realize, like, this is how I feel, and work through that.
Yeah, it's such a big deal. And I think that's a key thing, is you have a relationship with yourself. Once we become an adult with a fully developed brain, we actually become the primary caregiver of ourselves, not only physically, not only financially, but also emotionally. So actually, part of finding yourself again is learning to build that relationship with yourself, which means actually learning to attune to what you're feeling and validate those feelings. And it doesn't mean that you're going to let them lead you, but you're allowing them to move through. Because even if I know the right answer in my mind, I still have to let my feelings feel what they need to feel, so that then I'm actually freed up after I do that to see clearly how to go forward in a situation.
Such an important perspective there, because a lot of times we want to rush ourselves getting back to feeling okay, and not allow ourselves to feel all those things. And then even if we don't give ourselves that time and that moment, it doesn't seem, those feelings don't go away. They just catch up to us later on, and then we have to stop. Either we stop now or we stop later, but eventually all those things you're trying to suppress or hide, they find you again, or they surface, or they'll find a way to still let you know that they're there. Carly, tell us a little bit about your journey. I know you are on a different path than the one that you started. And it's like the path that you're on now feels more in alignment with your true passions, right?
One thing I think is interesting is I think your passions, like, I'm a plumbing apprentice now, and I don't think plumbing is my passion per se, although plumbing is pretty cool. But I think that it has become a passion because of I was kind of thrown into it. So a little background, I was a teacher and coach for 11 years. I taught middle school English, and then decided that the world is a really big place and wanted to try something new, but didn't feel like I had a lot of hard skills, and knew I didn't want to accrue any more debt. And so was thinking, like, what else is there besides going back to grad school? Because I didn't quite know what that was going to be. Like, if I knew I wanted to, like, be a lawyer or whatever, I would have done that, but I didn't have anything that stuck out at me. So I thought of all the things I'm really good at, and and I love this old house. Shayla, I think I told you that last time. I love this old house, and things sort of fell into place. And it was like, what about being in the trades? Something I quite literally had never thought of before. And so, yeah, I'm a year and a half into being a plumbing apprentice. And Meredith, this idea of ambiguous loss, that is like, I wrote that down and highlighted it. I was like, that's what that is. So thank you for sharing that. I think that changing careers can be a total ambiguous loss. And it is for me, you know, saying goodbye to this old version and accepting and figuring out who this new version of me is been exciting, but also like super hard and nothing I've ever done before. So it's been quite a transformation in a lot of different ways.
And in making this transition, did you feel like you had to find yourself again going from teaching to plumbing apprentice, and how so? Like, and what has this journey taught you about yourself?
I think when you are a teacher, that is who you are, or at least that was for me. Like, I was a teacher and that's how I defined myself, and I was a coach and that's who I was. And then when those huge building blocks come away, it's like, oh, okay, who am I? What do I like to do? Who am I besides my job? And I've realized like I have a lot more, I'm not going to say talents, but I guess interests than I'm started to write in my joke book. So I've started to, plumbing is actually a very creative career in a very particular way. But I think as a teacher, I was super creative. So my creativity is kind of changing, and I cook now. I'm a chef, and I like to write jokes. So those are the ways my creativity has sort of poured out.
And how do you like the person looking back in the mirror now?
Honestly, every day, I'm like, this is really impressive, Carly. Like, I didn't think we were going to be here. Like, I didn't think you could do it. And you did it. And you did it again and again. So I'm actually the most proud of myself I think I've ever been, which is kind of a cool and very like, wow, exciting feeling.
That's awesome. And Lina, I want to ask you before I get to Jessica and Shannon, when you look back in the mirror, how do you feel about that person looking back?
Proud. Proud, because I think it took a lot of courage to leave behind things that I thought I was supposed to do. You know, I thought, okay, if I'm not a lawyer or a doctor, then I have to be in tech, because that's the thing that's kind of, you know, like different from what, you know, a lot of women or people of color, you know, I associated with. So I was like, okay, what can I do? You know, so I think that there was a lot of baggage that I had from, you know, preconceived notions, or from even what society tells us that we're supposed to be doing. So proud to have taken the leap and just move forward. So
that's awesome. And I mean, what you're doing, both you and Carly, a lot of people have ideas for things they want to do and who they want to be and things they want to try, but they're afraid to try them because it takes courage to try something new. It takes courage to branch out. It takes courage to get outside the box that we place ourselves in, or the box that we think the world says we should inhabit, even if that box doesn't feel like, you know, maybe I don't fully fit here. And so that's awesome that you both are stepping out in that way. I want to go to you next, Jessica. When you hear finding myself again, how does that resonate with you, your journey and your story?
Oh man, so much so. I think I have had several periods in my life where I am reinventing and finding myself again. And as I look back and I was thinking about this series or this talk, it was so interesting to kind of think through all of these moments in my life where I've had to find myself and not really realize I was finding myself. I think the most recent time through COVID and losing all of my business and having to completely pivot and start over again was the first and only time I have consciously known that I'm in that space of finding myself. So as I look back, I see all these moments where I was like, oh yeah, you were finding yourself and you were rediscovering what and who you were. This was the moment during the pandemic where I was like, girl, here we go. About to be 40, about to try something completely different, about to pivot your career completely. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed what the question was. I probably
No, you're doing just fine. I had asked about finding myself again and how that connected with you and your journey and your story. Can you talk a little bit more? I mean, what were you doing and how did COVID impact that?
Absolutely.
And then, and get us to now. Yeah,
absolutely. So I was a corporate meeting and event planner for years. I left that career about 8 years ago. As I look back, this was one of the periods of redefining and finding myself, but I was working as a corporate event planner and just so burnt out. Just didn't know what I wanted to do next. I had 2 small kids and just felt so exhausted and so burnt out. So I left my corporate job. I had no intention of doing anything other than staying at home with my 2 small children, which was wonderful for about 3 months. And then I quickly realized that while I loved being home with them, being a full-time stay-at-home mom was not the role that I had envisioned for myself. So I went back to event planning, but this time it was for myself. So I started my own freelance meeting and event planning company, working for a lot of the same clients that I had in my previous role, but this time it was for myself, and it was so much different and so much more freeing. And then March 2020 hit, and like so many people in the hospitality industry, I was booked out for the entire year. And within a week, every meeting and event that I had booked out was completely gone. Kind of felt like that rug pulled out from under me. A month later, my husband was laid off from his job. So we were really just kind of reeling in this crazy space of what do we do next? But I always say that was that moment that in that, I would say 2 to 3 months, March, April, May, was kind of this time of get quiet, really turn inward. I think I went through that ambiguous loss, definitely didn't know what it was at the time, but I do feel like I went through this really intense grieving process of what my career was, what my life was, how attached I was to that career, and how much I felt like that defined who I was. But it was, I think a couple months is quick for me. It was really quick because it was in that moment, that space and time moment that I'd never given myself before, that I was really able to figure out what was most important to me and where I wanted to be, which brought me to coaching.
That's wonderful. And when you look back at the person in the mirror, what do you feel when you see her?
Man, she is cool. She is a badass chick. Hence the shaved head and the purple. I am just changing it up. But I think I look at her and I am like, you got this. I've had so many moments of that unworthiness, or you're not, who's going to listen to you, or you are not smart enough for that, all these nots and shoulds and woulds and coulds. And I look at myself now, and there's still those moments of doubt, don't get me wrong, but I look at her and I am like, this is you, this is where you should be.
That's awesome. And I want to let folks know, if you hear something that connects or resonates with you, definitely leave a comment below. We'll be able to get some of those comments on the screen for our participants. If you have any questions or anything, certainly leave those too, and we'll try to get those asked in the next 35 minutes or so. Shannon, I want to go to you next. Finding myself again. When you hear that, what does that mean to you and your journey?
Well, I would say much like Jessica and many of the other women, I have had to have those moments so many different times in my life. But most recently, throughout 2020 and 2021, I launched my business. I left corporate America. I left a huge wealth management division with a international company that I had spent 8 years at, and 8 years that I'm incredibly grateful for, and felt kind of called to do this other thing and leave and do my own thing, my own way, unlike the rest of the industry. in. And then March happened, and unlike Jessica's experience, and Jessica and I have been really good friends, so we've talked to each other through all of these different situations, but I had the pleasure of having people want to talk about money in 2020. So it helped launch my career as I left. But in the background, much like Jessica just said, I had this like little voice in the back of my head, like, who do you think that is? Who do you think you are? What are you trying to do with yourself? Are you really where you're supposed to be? All of those things were really hard for me. So I had to kind of sit back and, as Jessica said, sit in kind of that silence, processing for myself, like, what is it that I really wanted for my life? And going into this new stage, there were no rules. There was no rule book, which was actually really hard for somebody that is an A-type personality who is so used to like following the rules and going by that. I got to write the rule book. And now I continue to get to write the rule book. And I think one thing, as we've talked about, is we're always continually finding ourselves. Shayla, you mentioned this at the beginning, where, you know, we might look back 2 weeks from now and say, wow, I'm different. I say that, I think, every day as a mom of 2 kids. I feel like my parenting changes every single day. And some days I feel like I got it and some days I don't. So I think it's constantly a battle of understanding of who do I want to be and how am I going to be that person today, and living in that present space.
That's such an important perspective. And really, you have to, in the process of finding yourself again, give yourself grace, because not every day is going to be perfect. And not every day you're going to hit all the marks that you set out to. But that's okay, right, Meredith?
Yeah, I think that's a big part, is learning to be kind and patient with yourself in the process, and that it is a process. And as Shannon was just sharing, what it was making me think about is just with the doubts that are so common, especially when we start something new. A lot of people have heard the term imposter syndrome, and like, who am I to think that I'm doing this? Am I a fraud, or et cetera, et cetera. And a couple of things that I think about that. I remember my mom telling me this once, that everyone's big question when they're a kid is, what am I going to be when I grow up? And she said that an acorn doesn't stress out about what it's going to be when it grows up. By the property inherent within an acorn, it automatically grows into an oak tree. And so to me, how that applies to imposter syndrome is it's so key to recognize that we're on a developmental journey. So an acorn is not an imposter oak tree. It's just at an earlier developmental stage. We never give birth to a full-grown adult. That would be awkward and painful. Like we always give birth to something in seed form. And so it's about, we're not supposed to already be at the end. We just get to start exactly where we start and be kind and patient as we watch the development of the thing in us unfold over time.
Such a great perspective there. Carly, I wanted to ask you, when you look at the journey that you're presently on, what has it taught you about yourself and your abilities as a person?
Yeah, it has taught me that we are capable of way more than we give ourselves credit for. That is something that I'm reminded of daily. We are our worst critic. We are the hardest and sometimes least loving to ourselves. But I think I've been reminded of, like, you got this. Like, you can push yourselves. We all can push ourselves to do way more than we ever thought possible, which is cool, which is very cool. I mean, again, I'm riddled with self-doubt at work because I know very little. Going from teaching after 10 years, you feel like you got it, to knowing very little about plumbing and trying to figure it out. And, you know, plumbing is I'm the only woman I see around ever. So it's this very interesting dynamic. of being the only person like me around, which I really honestly have never experienced anywhere in my life. But I'm grateful to have this experience to know what that feels like, and then hopefully, be a trailblazer and sort of change the narrative of what it looks like to be a plumber or be in the trade. So, but yeah, I've learned that we can do a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
That's such a great point. And Lina, what have you learned about yourself in your transition?
I think I will agree with Carly there that, we have far more inside of us that we actually give ourselves credit for. But the other thing also is that I've really learned that for years I've confused doing more with being more. I've spent my time thinking that the more, more things I pile on my calendar, the more, the better contract or jobs or whatnot just meant that I was worth more. But I've learned that that's really not the case. And I've really learned to go inward and really ask myself, am I doing this for the approval of others? Am I doing this for, what I think society is expecting of me, or even what others expect of me? Or is it something that's really, out of my own will? And yeah.
That's such a great perspective, because sometimes we think, oh, the more things I'm involved in, the more places where my name can be, like that's a sign of success. But sometimes you can stretch yourself out and wear yourself thin trying to be in a bunch of different places, but not be effective in any of them because you can't really commit all the time to all the things because you're just trying to show up, but you can't even fully show up because you're so stretched thin. That's such a great point to mention there. Jessica, for you, what has this journey taught you about yourself again?
I totally resonate with both what Lina and Carly said. I think that we are much more difficult on ourselves than anyone else is. We are our worst critics, but also that I am a heck of a lot stronger than I ever thought I was, and that I can do. It's not even that I can do all the things. I can just do the things that I really am passionate and want to do. I don't have to even do all the things. I can just do what lights my soul on fire. And that has been a game changer for me.
And I wanted to ask you, Meredith, sometimes do you think that people are delayed in finding themselves because they're so worried about fitting into the box that the world or maybe their family or that others say that they should fit in? And so it keeps them from living what feels like the truest possible life, an expression of, the inside matching the outside. It kind of takes them a little bit longer to get there because maybe, that voice is kind of in the back of their head saying, oh, this is what I really love, but I've got to make myself fit here because all these other outside things, my family, be it, my social circle, be it whatever these external factors may be, I have to make sure I still fit in this box, even though I've got this nagging feeling I should be somewhere else.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. That's why I think it was so key. I heard Jessica say it, Lina, I think you too, Shannon, about going inward. And I think that's key here because part of this is the term in therapy, we call it self-attunement. It's similar to mindfulness, self-awareness, but it's basically the ability to be curious about what's happening on the inside. But the key is that it's from a kind and non-judgmental stance towards yourself. So it's just about beginning to become a student and be curious. And as you do that over time, we begin to become aware of what was actually programmed in here about all the shoulds of what I should be doing or what is expected of me, what I should do with my life versus going inward and beginning to see what would I actually choose. And this is where we don't get to choose our starting point, like the family we grew up in, the time in history we're alive, the culture, all these different factors, but we get to actually choose where we take that. And so often, though, that is a process of first untangling the expectations and agendas of others, even if they're not even necessarily bad agendas, is recognizing, though, that sometimes other people in our life have expectations and agendas for us, and that we actually have a choice of what do I choose. And that can often take a longer time because there's lots of layers to untangle there.
Such a great point. Expectations and agendas of others. Sometimes that can keep people trapped in living a life that feels less in alignment with the one that feels like the life they want to lead. It can maybe take you longer to get on this course to living for yourself. Shannon, if you could talk a little bit about when you kind of got to the place where you decided, I'm going to start my own company, I'm going to start my own business. It was after trying to fit the ideas and visions that you had into someone else's box. And it's like, this box isn't going to fit what my vision is. So I'm going to have to create my own box and my own lane and my own space.
Yeah. So I went through actually, like, take it back to the time where I like really was like, okay, there's something else out there. There's something else that I want to be able to do. I went on this awesome trip to England with my dear friend who's like my sister. We actually went there for the royal wedding. Yes, we are those Americans who sat there watching the royal wedding on the main lawn. It was amazing. It's like every girl's dream. We actually saw them. The carriage went by. But it was my first trip without a husband, without kids, and internationally. And I fell in love with this like feeling of letting go and like not being, I work in wealth management. Like I work in the space where you are put in a box. You are defined as what you are supposed to be. You aren't the one that is creative. You wear a pencil skirt, navy blue blazer, you know, like all of the things. And I tried to like push the envelopes. And finally, I actually hired a coach because I was like, maybe I just want to leave the industry. Maybe this is just not where I'm supposed to be. And through that process of unwinding some of the things, she was like, well, what you love what you do. What if you just did it on your own terms? And that's when we started, you know, like small things to push the limits. Like she's like, what kind of shoes do you want to be able to wear to work? I'm like, not high heels. I want to wear high tops to work. So I went out and bought myself some funky high tops, and I got like outside of the box. I remember my boss coming to me and being like, we're at a client event, and he's like, you don't have heels on. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to wear heels anymore. When next time I wear heels, you're wearing heels. And like, that was my element of, and he and I were very good friends. So like I could push the envelope a little bit with him on that. But it was this feeling of like, oh, I can like push a little bit more, maybe not be that person. And then the pushing got pushed back. And that's when people started to say, well, what are you doing? Like, why do you want to do this in this space? And I'm like, well, these are the things that I really love us to be able to do. I want to focus on sustainable investing. I want to diversify our workforce. And they were like, Shannon, that takes time. And, you know, we got other focuses and things that we need to do. Funny, now everybody's talking about sustainability and diversity in the workplace, but this was me like, 8 years ago. Nobody was doing it then. But I got tired and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to take that element and I'm going to burst out of this cage that I'm in. I'm going to take the chance. And what's the worst thing that could happen? I could fail and I'd have to go back to corporate America and get a job. Well, then I guess that's the worst thing that can happen. I mean, there are a lot of other worse things that could happen in those scenarios, but that's what I had to tell myself. I had to say, okay, go there. What is the worst thing that could happen to you? And then problem solve from that worst thing so that you can feel a little bit more comfortable saying yes and taking that big step forward.
And that's such a great story that you shared. As you were talking, it kind of made me think about when we want to kind of stretch or grow, sometimes the people in our circle or in our space don't recognize the person that we want to be or where we're going. And so it's easier for us to stay the same because they know what that is. But it could be the hardest thing ever for us to remain in that place. Would you say, Meredith?
Yeah, I think that's very common. And that's that's part of sometimes the ambiguous loss we have to go through, is even grieving, even if it's as small or as large as grieving that someone that was close to us doesn't understand, or even if they're well intended, that they're actually wanting us to stay in their version of who we are that's comfortable to them, and we ultimately can't do that. So that's often a grieving process, to feel that and let that go, and ultimately decide to accept and be true to ourselves, and see if people will allow us to, if they'll come with us as we expand and grow and evolve.
And then sometimes we have to be okay if they don't come with us, and know that the path that we're on feels right for us. And then there's that sometimes uncomfortable space of, okay, I'm used to having these people by my side. I know I want to stretch. They can't stretch with me, but I got to keep stretching and hope that they come along, but still continuing to take that new course, or that course that feels right for us, even if they don't get it, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, there's a little comic I've seen illustrated before, and I really love it. It's a caterpillar sitting at the table with a butterfly, like a monarch butterfly, and the caterpillar's the old friend, and it says something like, "You've changed." And the monarch butterfly just says, "We're supposed to." Like, of course, we're supposed to change and evolve. And then the other thing I would say is, because I work with a lot of pioneering entrepreneurs, and I always draw like a little picture of a mountain or a triangle and say, there's a lot of people at the base of a mountain. There's a lot of people that hang out there. It's not good or bad, right or wrong, but there's more people there, and not as many people make that trek up. And so when you make the trek up and you forge a new path, it's kind of like you're the tip of the spear. You're the one taking the machete to a jungle. And as you go up that, the air is thinner. It's often a lonely journey. So it's really key, what I always say, is to look across peaks to find other people that are making that trek on their own mountain. So that's really key. And to recognize that sometimes what you go through, the pain in the process, it's actually not just about you. It's actually what you go through. You have the keys to help many others. You're actually clearing a way for others to follow behind. And that's, again, why I bring up the ambiguous loss concept a lot, because if you're pioneering, you're going to continually be going into new territory and shedding old layers, which will entail letting go of what was. And sometimes we have to let go of even the good things of the past to be prepared for what's next. But as we do that, we get to see the bigger picture, that there's a lonely part in this, but there's actually a beautiful part of preparing the way. And then from this vantage point, I actually get to connect in new ways that I could have never seen before. I could have never seen this view at the base of this mountain.
So important. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving us some perspective to kind of latch on to, because when you're on this path that feels truest to who you are, sometimes you don't really know where it's going to lead. You know where you want to go, but you're not sure if the steps you're taking are the right ones. Are they the best ones? But it's that spot where you're unsure if I should keep going this way or not, where it's probably most important to keep going. And see where that leads. LINA, I wanted to ask you, as you made your transition to creating jewelry and moving from tech, did you feel like you had those family members or friends that maybe didn't understand, the path that you wanted to take, and you had to kind of navigate that space of relationships changing? Can you talk about what that was like for you?
Yes. It was, frankly, it was painful because I had close family members. Even my own husband, he didn't really understand the whole process. I felt like I didn't. So my process didn't just feel like moving from tech to designing jewelry, but it felt like just the journey to my true self. So that also meant, that some of my reactions toward him, or some of my views toward other people also got impacted by the process. So I think Meredith said something about it being lonely but beautiful. I think that's really a good analogy for this. And I feel what was really important in my journey is that I've discovered or invested in the value of coaching and therapy. And I feel like when you are in the trenches and you feel like, nobody around you really understands what's going on, even though you're actually sure that you're on the right path, but there's no validation, or there's no the environment in which you are in is not really conducive to your process or to your progress. I feel like coaching and therapy are fantastic tools that I will always recommend.
And so you had to find the support to incorporate into your circle to be there to help you grow into this next phase.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And how do you feel that having those tools in place have helped you stay on the track that you're on and feel more assured that this path is for me?
So therapy has helped me understand the journey. It has helped me understand why I was doing some of the things that I was doing, or how some of my, experiences when I was younger colored my perspective or my choices. So that was very, very helpful. And then coaching helped me really gain that self-assurance and help me focus on my goal, really, and not get distracted by everything that was actually weighing me down. So I feel like both coaching was really a good way to move forward, but then therapy provided kind of the backbone to peel all the layers that really made up of that really covered, I guess, my true self, I guess. And so that was really, yeah. So those two have been really amazing for me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jessica, I would like to go to you next. If you looked back at yourself maybe 10 years ago and looked at where you are now, what would you say to your self 10 years ago if you knew that where you are now is where you would be?
Oh, I love this. I actually did this when I was going through my life coaching certification program. This was one of the activities we did, was writing a letter to ourself. It was our 18-year-old self. So it wasn't just 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I know, shocker, right? Not 10 years ago, it was an 18. I think I would just tell her to trust the process. Oftentimes I like to control outcomes. I like to know what's going to happen before it happens. No surprises. But I think through this journey, I have really leaned into trusting that the work I'm putting in is going to pay off. And it might not look like I have envisioned it or how I plotted out, but it's going to work out the way it is supposed to. So I think, yeah, just trust.
And same question for you, Carly. If you could tell your self maybe 10 years ago, 18 years, look back and tell her if you were to encourage it, knowing that where you are now.
I would, if I were to talk to myself, myself 10 years ago, I would have said something similar to Jessica. Just relax, trust that the universe will find a way to make things, I don't know if right is the correct word, but trust the process. Trust that you are where you need to be. Trust that, and trust myself, probably trust myself. I think we are all, but me, I plagued with some self-doubt, plagued with, am I doing the right thing? Is this right? But I would have loved to just to be able to tell myself, trust yourself and trust the universe, and trust your mom. Listen to your mother. That's what I would have said.
Listen to mom.
Yeah, 97% of the time she was right. Mom, if you're watching, you were right. Okay, but those are the three things.
Thanks so much, Carly. Such a great word of advice there. Listen to mom. And then for you, Shannon, same question. What would you tell yourself, 18-year-old self or self 10 years ago? What would you want her to know if you knew the path and the journey and the place you're in now is where she would ultimately be?
If I was to talk, well, I think it would be two different conversations, 18-year-old self and 10-year, because I was not 18 10 years ago. Shocker too, right? But I think, for me, it's let go. Like Jessica, I am kind of a little bit of a control freak, and I like to know the outcomes. I like to know everything. So like, being able to just like let go and be present, that life is going to happen and it's going to be better than you ever thought. You will be in a situation that you couldn't even have dreamt up in your wildest dreams, and let go and just relax and enjoy the ride. You are capable of doing those things. I think that was what I would tell my 18-year-old self. Maybe let go of your ego a little bit too. Because, when you're 18 and you're young and you just get out, you're like, yeah, I can do all the things. And then my, my like 10 years, it would be, life is about to rock you in the next 10 years. So find those people that are really going to be with you through the ups and the downs, and not just there for the fact that you throw a good party or you dance on the dance floor or you buy them rounds of drinks, but find the people that are going to be there when you're in the fetal position crying and need somebody to bring you up. Because I think that community is really important. And I heard everybody say, trust yourself. And I think sometimes we need somebody else that's there that's going to hold the mirror up for us to be able to see it too. And those people come in for a moment and for a period of time, sometimes for a reason. Isn't that saying like a
reason, a season, or a lifetime?
Yeah. Reason, a season, and a lifetime. Yeah. So I think that's what I would tell myself 10 years ago.
That's wonderful. Let's see. We've got a comment here from Dawn. Yes, number one is trust yourself. Thanks so much for sharing that, Dawn. And before we leave today, we've got about 6 minutes left. Meredith, what would you want to leave people with if they are on their personal journey to finding self? What would you want them to leave this conversation with today?
Very, very good question. I think just off the top of my head, it's worth the process. And I think I might have shared this on a conversation a week or so ago, but I think there's this really, at least for me, this useful thought experiment. And if I think about one day my life ending and getting on the other side of things and suddenly becoming aware of everything that was possible in this lifetime. And as I do that, and to find out, wow, I only operated in a small pinky of what was possible because what would my family think? Or it's never been done before. At least for me, I don't want to leave anything on the table. I think it's part of really recognizing that this life really is a precious gift, and that there's so many things outside of our control. And at the same time, we have way more agency than we know. And you will never regret doing what it takes to come into alignment with what's on the inside of you. I mean, everyone who shared, and I've had my own journey of leaving my private therapy practice, leaving it behind and charting a new course to bring these skills into the business world, which is something I would have never in a million years guessed 10 years ago I would be doing. I couldn't have even conceived of it. And yet it's so much more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. And so it's worth taking the risk to trust your gut and to follow the journey into the unknown, even when it doesn't make sense to your intellect, and trust the process.
I love that perspective. Dawn sharing also so much power in letting go of what is not within your control. And I just had this great conversation this week with Shelby A. Wagner, Catalyst for Conversation. And we were talking about, how incredible the world would be if everyone literally had the courage to live the life that they imagine, to really live the things that they love, to live the things that they are most passionate about. And just, even if you're taking the journey that they've already had and the life they've already lived, just what they could uniquely bring to other spaces by, taking the experiences that brought them to now, but then switching gears and investing their time and energy into what they really love, just how much that could move the world forward. And could that help solve some of the challenges that we face in the world today? Because all of those people would be bringing their unique journeys and experiences and stories into new spaces. And, those spaces could be transformed just by the courage to show up as you are. And when I say as you are, it's as the person that feels like the realest, truest representation of you. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation today. We've got about 3 minutes left. I let Meredith give her final thoughts. Carly, if you could leave anyone with a comment, and we'll go through Lina, Jessica, and Shannon and wrap up.
Yeah, I would say pay attention to what makes you feel, or what piques your interest. I think when you get into the grind of the day-to-day, at least for me, you hustle to get to work, you hustle home to make dinner, you do all the things you're supposed to do. And I kind of stopped paying attention to things that made me feel or piqued my interest or pulled me in or excited me. So I would say in that self-reflection, that curiousness about yourself, which I'm not as good as that as I'd like to be, but I hope to improve. But pay attention to what excites you, and your passion or your interest or a passion might lie there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Lina, what would you like to say?
I would say be a student of yourself. Similar to what Carey just said. And then I also said, follow the peace. Follow the peace. I feel like peace always leaves clues if we actually, take some time to look for them, listen. So follow the peace. It's always worth it. So
I love that. That's such a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Jessica, you can go next.
Yeah. So many good things said today. I just am eating them all up. Thank you so much. I think the piece that I feel like that I got stuck on so much through my process was a lot of the self-reflection. So I spent a lot of time getting quiet, reading, praying, meditating, listening to my thoughts, really doing a lot of that inner work. I would say don't get stuck there. Oftentimes, I think we are doing all of that work, but then we stop at taking that inspired action. So don't stop there. Take that action. And even if that action is messy or scary, or you have no freaking clue what you're doing, it will create clarity. Action creates clarity. I say that all the time. It creates clarity every single time. So just do it messy and figure it out along the way, because I promise you, you're going to figure out so much more by doing than by not.
And I love that message behind you. We can do hard things.
Oh, yes. The little Glennon Doyle. Love that.
Yes, such a great point. Yes, that's so true. And sometimes it may feel hard, the journey to finding yourself again, but stay on it. It's worth it.
Yes.
And last but not least, Shannon, what would you like to leave us with today?
Well, I think everybody had some great things to say. Mine's going to be a little bit different. Find the joy in everything that you do. And maybe it's stopping to have a dance party. Maybe it's running in the rain. Maybe it's getting on the sled because we're all in Minnesota right now, and you're going down like a snowy hill and you're just like letting go of all of it, or you're going down a water slide with your kids, something that brings you a level of joy in a journey that can be so challenging and hard. I think a lot of times, especially as women, we have and hold ourselves to such great standards, and we take care of everybody else around us. But what truly brings us those elements of joy and kind of bringing back those elements of our youth? For me, it's dance parties, water slides, and sledding. So that's why I recommend them.
I love that. That's lovely. And we should do more of all three. So thank you so much for joining me today, ladies. And thank you all for watching. Certainly, if anything resonated with you, still leave it in the comments. And if you all can hang here for just a second, I'll go ahead and wrap up the live stream, and then we'll chat in the backstage area for just a second. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.